What's happening in your life right now? Good or bad, positive or negative. Your finances, what's happening? Lack, surplus, just enough. Relationships, are they healthy? Are they filled with drama? Emotionally, are you at rest or are you under stress? Physically, are you healthy or are you fighting for your health? How's your thought life? What's happening in your life right now? What was the first thing that came to your mind when I asked that question? Can you identify it? Take a moment, and can you see where that started? The life that we live today is the result of decisions and actions we've made in the past. And those decisions are seeds that were planted or we allowed them to be planted in our life. I don't want to minimize tragedy or abuse, tragic things. Those things happen. And it's not always something that you did, but it happened to you. So I want to encourage you to stay strong, and I'd like to pray for you that you will grow stronger and that you will move forward. But in our discussion today, what I'd like to do is look at things that we can control, things that we've seen planted in our lives that we were part of. And I want to put our attention towards that and see the results of those actions. What I'm talking about is the kingdom key of the law of sowing and reaping. It's a kingdom principle that, when we understand it, can literally change our future. You see, the kingdom of God isn't something that we just put in our back pocket. It's not something that we use as a get out of jail free card. Instead, the kingdom of God is powerful, and when it's applied properly and lived correctly, it's a better way to live. So when we understand the kingdom keys and the principles, it will improve our life here on earth. When we understand the kingdom, we see the way God intended for us to live. God gave us these keys so that we can see them and we can apply them in our life. And sowing and reaping is one of them. Now, sowing and reaping can take on many different forms. It's very broad and it has many applications. What I want us to see is sowing is connected to a seed. It's an action. Sowing sets things in motion. A seed that's planted is set in motion, whether it's a figurative seed or a literal seed. Reaping is the result of what we've sown. It's gaining, acquiring, and realizing the product of a previous act. Reaping always reflects what was sown. So when we sow, we set things in motion, and when we reap, we obtain the result of what was set in motion. Now, often we focus on the results because those are visible, tangible. We can see them or experience them, and we don't often connect them to what they started from. So that's why I started with that question earlier. What is happening in your life right now? What I want us to do is take a few moments and look at the seeds. Seeds always produce after their kind. It always produces after its kind. In Genesis, when God created the earth, he had seeds and he says, I want them to produce after their kind. In fact, when he made man, he said, let us make man in our image according to our likeness. We were created according to that same principle, after God's image and after God's likeness. Jesus in Matthew was teaching his disciples the same truth. And in Matthew chapter 7, he taught them that a tree was known by its fruit. And then again in Matthew chapter 12, he's teaching the disciples and he says, a tree is recognized by its fruit. So you know a tree by its fruit, after its kind. Now, practically speaking, this can be applied to parenting and training our children. Teach your children to recognize behavior and the results of that behavior. The seeds that the child will sow will have a result. Teach your children this principle early. Teach them when they're young. My wife and I taught our children even to look at the actions and behaviors of others and to be careful of who they hung out with. We taught them that those actions and behaviors and words revealed who that individual was, and to be very aware of that as their friendships grew or their relationships grew. It almost sounds too simple, but don't overlook it. And I will say it's not always easy. It takes hard work and consistent work, but it does pay off. Look at the fruit. Teach your children to look at the fruit. You reap what you sow. In Galatians 6, it says that don't be deceived. God's not mocked. Whatever you reap, you sow. And I've learned that from experience. And I think if we're honest, we probably all can say we've learned that from experience. Behavior that I planted or sown, actions, attitudes, words, language. I've sown them and I get a result. I've tried to apply this as a young project manager when I worked, and I applied Proverbs 15 verse 1, where it says that a soft answer turns away wrath, but grievous words stir up anger. Now I will say it didn't work every single time, but it did work most of the time. I sowed that verse and I reaped that verse. You see, there's a real and definite relationship between the quality of life that we live and the seeds that we've sown. So be careful what you're sowing. Be careful where you sow. Do not cast your pearls before swine. Know your ground. Different ground yields different results. Know what you're sowing. In Job 4, it says that the writer says, in my experience, those who plow injustice and those who sow trouble reap the same. Know what you're sowing. In Hosea 8, it says that when you sow the wind, you reap the whirlwind. And then in chapter 10, he goes on and he's talking to the nation of Israel, and he says, plow new ground, plant righteousness, and reap the blessing of that, and see how that blessing is from God. But then he continues in the next verse and he says, but instead you, Israel, planted evil and you reaped its harvest. You've eaten the fruit produced by your lies. God told Adam to tend and to keep his garden in Genesis 2. And it says that God took man and he put him in the Garden of Eden to tend and to keep it. This word tend means to cultivate, work it, physical work, physical exercise. And the word keep means to protect. Work your seed that you sow. Protect it. Guard it. And what's amazing is this was before the fall. So God's perfect plan was for us to have seed and to protect and to tend it and to see it grow. Look at what you want and then work backwards to see what you have to do to get there. Proverbs 11, it says, the one who sows righteousness reaps a sure reward. So plant what you want to grow in your life. Survey your life and say, this is what I'd like. Then see what you have to do to start it. Because if you want to change your future, you do it by changing your present.